Every weekday, Septa moves more than 500,000 people, including commuters, students, families, and visitors who rely on it as Philadelphia's lifeline. But that massive network is now facing some of its toughest challenges yet. As we all know, Septa is facing a doomsday. The countdown is on for one of the most critical moments in Philadelphia's transit history. This massive system is now on the brink of service cuts, fare hikes, and even line shutdowns. However, good progress has been made, though at a high cost. So what is the good news? And what is the trade-off for this lifeline? Ride along in today's episode of Great Train Speed. Septa, the Southeastern Pennsylvania Transportation Authority, is the backbone of transit in the Philadelphia region, moving more than 700,000 passengers every day across 5 counties. Its network spans buses, subways, trolleys, and the regional rail system. But in early 2025, this vital system faced one of its toughest tests yet, a $213 million budget shortfall. The reasons were clear. Federal COVID-19 relief funding had expired, ridership still lagged behind pre-pandemic peaks, and operating costs climbed sharply due to inflation, maintenance demands, and heightened public safety needs. By mid-2025, the crisis had deepened. On July 15th, Septa's board approved a 2-phase plan that could reshape travel in the region. A 21.5% fare increase paired with a 20% reduction in service. And from January 1st, 2026, an additional 25% service cut, a 9 p.m. network-wide curfew, and the closure of 5 regional rail lines.
We're on the Paoli-Thorndale line. This is one of 5 regional rail lines set to be cut.
Under these changes, base fares will rise to $2.90 per ride, while a monthly TransPass will climb from $96 to $116. The projected ripple effects are striking: $20 billion in property value losses, $448 million less in annual tax revenue, the loss of 76,700 jobs, and $6 billion in lost wages over the next 3 decades. The social costs are equally severe. Tens of thousands of airport employees and night shift workers could lose essential services. Traffic congestion is expected to worsen. Recently completed capital projects could sit idle, and rural shared ride programs for seniors and people with disabilities may collapse without additional state funding. Governor Shapiro has proposed $282.8 million in new transit funding, with $161 million earmarked for Septa, but resistance in the state Senate, particularly from Republicans focused on road investments, has stalled the plan. Without a deal, advocates warn of a doomsday outcome for public transit, economic equity, and the region's long-term growth.
Without long-term sustainable funding from the state, we are forced to make decisions that no one at this table wants to make.
Septa is now entering its final countdown to avoid major service cuts. The agency has just days to close a $213 million budget gap with no reliable backup plan left. Without new state funding by August 14th, a 20% reduction in transit service will take effect on August 24th, eliminating 32 bus routes, shortening 16 others, and reducing frequencies across buses, trolleys, subways, and regional rail. One of the strongest voices against additional funding has been Senate Majority Leader Joe Pittman, our Senate District 41. His refusal to support new resources is seen by advocates as a major factor driving Septa's crisis. For the thousands of riders who depend on the system daily, the stakes are far more than financial, because service cuts mean fewer buses and trains, longer waits, and reduced reliability, making it harder to reach work, school, healthcare, and other essential destinations. With the August 14th deadline fast approaching, the question is no longer whether the impact will be felt, but whether state leaders will act in time to prevent it. However, there is new progress made. So what's going on? Let's find out in the next part.
There has been a flurry of activity here at the Capitol. The Senate passed a bill that has funding for Septa, but given what we're hearing from Democrats, that will likely stall.
A newly proposal that would stop Septa's doomsday plan from taking effect was surprisingly passed by Pennsylvania Senate Republicans. In Harrisburg, state senators voted to advance a funding package aimed at closing the agency's $213 million budget gap and avoiding the sweeping service cuts scheduled for later this month. Governor Josh Shapiro's office was quick to respond. A spokesman called the measure clearly not a serious long-term proposal that can pass both chambers, urging lawmakers to return to negotiations and keep working at it. One of the plan's most vocal supporters, Philadelphia freshman State Senator Joe Picozzi, highlighted a Republican-led amendment that would fund Septa's shortfall for the next 2 years. The proposal would draw $419 million from Pennsylvania's Transportation Trust Fund, a pool of capital dollars normally reserved for long-term infrastructure projects.
Now we're going to probably stop service for other needs.
Septa General Manager Scott Sauer sharply criticized the approach, warning it could make the agency's long-term problems worse. "It's robbing Peter to pay Paul," he said. Diverting these funds, he explained, could delay or halt critical safety-related work, including repairs and replacements for what he described as the oldest rail fleet in the country. Those dollars are also needed to upgrade the track, modernize signals and infrastructure, and bring stations into compliance with ADA accessibility standards. That's all capital dollars, Sauer emphasized. This has sparked a wave of opinion that Pennsylvania deserves leaders who recognize public transportation is not a luxury, it's essential for an inclusive, sustainable, and thriving state. Could this funding fight actually bring Septa to a screeching halt? Let us know what you think. Comment 1 if you believe Septa should get the funding it needs, or 0 if you feel differently. The debate over how to save Septa has gained momentum across social media platforms, from Reddit threads to Twitter discussions. For many Philadelphians, the situation is frustrating. Philadelphia remains one of the few major U.S. cities that is both relatively affordable and supported by above-average public transit. Yet it is now facing what some describe as a transit recession, even as nearly every other city along the Northeast Corridor works to expand and modernize its systems. On the other side of the political divide, Governor Josh Shapiro has introduced historic transit funding proposals for 2 consecutive years. The Pennsylvania House has passed his plan 4 times, allocating support for Septa, Pittsburgh Regional Transit, and other agencies across the state. While many commend Shapiro's persistence, some writers argue he could push harder to secure a final deal given the scale of what's at stake. The potential consequences of failure are clear. Losing transit service would mean longer commutes, increased congestion on already crowded roads, higher emissions, and the loss of one of Philadelphia's key competitive advantages. For a city where public transit is intertwined with economic vitality, environmental goals, and access to opportunity, the standoff between the Senate's inaction and the House's repeated approvals feels like a political deadlock with real-world costs. If this stalemate continues, the impact will reach far beyond missed buses or delayed trains. It will mean lost jobs, reduced economic mobility, and a city forced to step backward when it should be moving forward. With just days left to close the gap, Septa's fate now rests with Harrisburg. The stakes are clear: fund the system that keeps Pennsylvania moving, or allow one of its most vital public assets to slide into decline. The clock is ticking, and that's the last stop for today. We're glad you joined the ride. Stay sharp, stay inspired, and keep watching the rails ahead, because there's a lot more coming on Great Train Speed. Catch you next time.